Hello everybody, my name is Luke Marr and this is Hot Mode, and today on Hot Mode we are coming to you with a Dune 2 celebrity fashion review. We're going to be looking at a bunch of the looks from the Dune 2 premieres that happened over the months of February and March leading up to the release of Dune 2 the movie. We have Timothee Chalamet, Zendaya, we have Florence Pugh, we got Rebecca Ferguson, we got a lot of people to talk about, Anya Taylor-Joy. There's so much to discuss. This video is full of spoilers, so if you've not seen Dune 2 and you don't want me to spoil it, I'm gonna spoil it. We're gonna start by going through the celebrities via the cities went to do the premieres. So, without further ado, let's get into it. So we are starting off with Viva Las Vegas, and we have Zendaya and Timothee Chalamet here. These are the only two celebrities that I could find photos of from Vegas. That black leather vest style that he's wearing over top of a white t-shirt is actually vintage Helmut Lang. And this is one of the Helmut Lang bulletproof vests that came out, I believe, like 1997, 1996. I don't know exactly the exact date range. Those sort of vests were Helmut Lang sort of trying to recreate or like repurpose different utility garments. I mean, he did like parkas and anoraks, he did all different kinds of styles and sort of made them more like fashion garments that people could buy and wear in expensive luxury fabrics. So the idea of doing like a bulletproof vest but in leather, I think would render it less bulletproof. So I think in the context of Paul Atreides fighting a lot of wars and doing battle and all these things, especially against the Emperor and the Empire, and the ending of the film, spoiler alert, again, he's gonna go fight the Great Houses. This idea of sort of bulletproof vests and sort of military-esque wear does track, again, just in the context of Helmut Lang though, it's done in sort of a luxury fabric and totally changes the context of it. I do love the leather pants. I think they're cool, I think they work. I think even the little knee pads are interesting, and the black boots, again, all plays in. I think it's very chic of him. As for Zendaya, she's wearing Louis Vuitton. It's a halter neck vest that is almost 2D of sorts, which I think is really intriguing. It's very Nicolas Ghesquière, and to me, it kind of almost looks Margiela-esque just because you have that one singular sort of buckle belt strap that wraps around the side. To me, that reads very Margiela-esque. But when you pair it with these herringbone sort of pants, again, very chic, totally changes this idea of traditional tailoring. Firstly, dimensions. I mean, again, the 2D element of this halter, waistcoat, vest thing, but also you have this different sort of proportion in the pant in terms of they're curved a little bit around the sort of calf area. You can see it on both sides. It's just not normal of tailored pants, but they have this oversized, cuffed feeling to them. It's very chic. I don't really know what Zendaya's has to do with Dune, especially when you look at Chani. She's not usually wearing any sort of tailoring in the sense of, you know, three-piece suits, but I still like it. And Zendaya is Louis Vuitton ambassador, so I think they're also trying to play that in a little bit. Now, things got much realer when we got to Mexico City because a majority of the cast did show up for the photo call and premiere. So firstly, we're going to talk about Austin Butler. Now listen, I gave Austin Butler some grief, and I will say this look in black with a chalk stripe, not the craziest look, especially considering Zendaya with Dune 1 and also with the help of stylist Laurent essentially put together a very clear and concise idea of, for this film, we are going to do method dressing. So when I saw this from Austin, I was kind of like, feels like Elvis. I know that you really love Elvis. I'm happy for you. You gotta go Dooney. A little Mr. Fade action here with the bald head. There was a lot there I expected of Austin. I do think that this is very Saint Laurent. I love a Saint Laurent. I love the wide leg. It's like a beautiful Le Smoking suit, but for men, which is funny because like the Le Smoking suit was originally for men and then Saint Laurent made it for women, so now like Le Smoking suit is for women. But I also like the idea of it also being for men. That sort of bold 80s shoulder is there. And he's pulling it off. Like, he looks really good. Any other premiere, I would have been like, yeah, Austin, you look cool. Happy to see it. Nice, interesting silhouette. It's just that, again, when you put anybody next to Zendaya, when it comes to premieres, it's tough. You know what I mean? You have to raise your bar. You're never going to raise the bar high enough to get to her level, but you are expected to raise the bar. So, while I love this look in terms of look itself, I think in the context, was a tad bit disappointed. The other look that Florence wore, which was to the actual premiere, I really loved. It's a sleeveless white semi-sheer dress, floor length. It might be a top and a skirt. Again, I'm not really sure. I thought it was a dress. But it's by the brand Standing Ground. And Standing Ground does those really intriguing beaded styles that to me always look like anal beads. But what I thought was really, really interesting about this ruched skirt with the beading in it that sort of flares out almost like a centipede is that it kind of looked like when we see the sandworms underneath the ground, especially in the second movie when you see the little baby sandworms that you get the water of life from, they tap and then the sandworm like kind of comes to them. I thought that that's kind of what this was meant to look like, tap into and represent. And that I think is cool. I really like the look. I think that it feels very sandwormy, duney, but at the same time feels very chic, feels very textured, and again, is Florence going for it? And this one, I loved. Go Florence. Proud of you, queen. You're a star. The other Timothee look that we saw, again, kind of felt disappointing to me. This is a full Prada look, and it's a shirt with a jacket, and essentially it's an intriguing take on a suit. It's a gray suit. We can see that there are darts fitting in at the bodice. There's a crease down the front in gray, and then they've taken the sleeves and really pushed them all the way up to around the elbow area, and the black button-down shirt with no collar, intriguingly, is sort of left to be exposed. And so I feel like it's maybe a take on like wrinkling and things like that, which Prada has been playing with for decades, but also in recent collections we've seen a lot more of the wrinkling coming through. We also see the Prada leather belt in black wrapped around multiple times, which again, I like the styling idea. I just don't know in general if I love the look. There's just something about it that feels, I don't want to say forced, but it does feel forced. It doesn't flow super easily. It doesn't feel really natural. It just feels like we were trying really hard. And the thing is, I love trying really hard. I feel like there is a Prada collection from way back when that probably relates somehow to all of this. And maybe this is a take on an old Prada collection, but I can't really see it. It might be like a military-inspired thing, but again, Paul Atreides, military, there's only so much that I can like give before I need to take in. Now, we're on to Zendaya, and here the first look we'll talk about is this custom experience by the brand Torisheju. Now, Torisheju is an up-and-coming brand, and it is designed by Torisheju Dumi, who is, I believe, Nigerian, British, and Brazilian. The collection that she put out, not for fall 2024, but for spring 2024, I was there, it was really cool, it was really interesting, was this whole idea of looking at the different draping techniques and styles across the world, because Torisheju did post a bunch of the inspirations, and you can see women from all different cultures and different parts of the earth showcasing how they have draped textiles over their bodies traditionally. But I would say the central draping inspiration for the collection was the Nigerian lapa, which is essentially sort of like a style of draping that comes from Nigeria. I thought it was kind of cool. I will say, when we see these sort of foam rings that sit, you know, on the hip and the waist, we can also see them sort of create like an armhole. It is a little bit different, but at the same time, I do think that it is rather intriguing to see. And then looking at the fact that when Paul Atreides does go to sort of the south of Arrakis and sees the Fremen in a wider context for the first time, and not just like the rebels that are fighting House Harkonnen and fighting the spice production, there is a really sort of diverse range of skin tones and people that exist within the Fremen universe. So that maybe that's what we were getting at, is this idea of all of these people that all exist, but they do something similar, but they're all different based on the culture, just in little separate ways. The look itself, it's a little crazy for me, 100% without a doubt, but I do think, again, with a little bit more context, it helps to sort of decipher what's going on just a little bit. Now, the last Mexico City look we'll talk about is, again, Zendaya, and it is a custom version of a Bottega look from the fall 2023 collection. The look is really interesting because it's this sort of brown wool turtleneck shrug that's a little bit oversized and does expose just a little bit of underboob. Instead of having this full bodice of this green leather that is embossed to look like ostrich leather, which it's not, it's just regular cow leather that's been embossed to look like ostrich, we see that it's actually just sort of like a waistband of this embossed ostrich leather, and then a slitted brown skirt with a little bit of lining underneath and a brown shoe. I do really like it. I thought it was a totally different silhouette for Zendaya, although she has been doing a lot of crop tops for the Dune films, and we'll talk about it as we go on. I like the fact that we took out the top piece of the leather in terms of the bodice, because I did feel like it could be definitely a little clunky up there. I think leather is a really hard material to work with, especially when it's a stiff leather like that, and we could see it even on the runway that it was better off without. The other thing is they lengthened the skirt, which I think obviously gave it more of like a gown sort of feature. It made it a little bit more evening, whereas the skirt on the runway was more sort of day wear length. In general, I thought it was a cool, chic look. Listen, you give me brown, I'll take it. I also thought there was an interesting idea of like the textural leather. We then moved on to Paris, Gay Paris, and we'll first talk about Seydoux, who wore custom Louis Vuitton. It's this blue velvet gown with this cape thing, but like a stiff structure to it and a little silver bow in the center. The one thing I'll say is like around the side bust area, it doesn't look like it fits super duper well. It looks a little wrinkled and a little crinkled. I love the look because I love the context of it. If you've seen the film, you know who Lady Margot, the Lady Fenring, I don't know exactly how you do it, but in the film, does actually wear a blue velvet hooded cloak, shrug, stole dress when she is trying to get Mr. Fade, né Baron, to consummate a bebe. I did think it was a really smart way of going about building into her wardrobe what was going on in the movie without it feeling exactly the same as the movie. I also love the fact that we get to see Nicolas Ghesquière sort of work with those futuristic, sort of spacey sort of shapes in that off-the-shoulder stiff stole thing. Is very much so into like the future and space. So I was happy to see that the celebrities that have to do with LV were pretty into letting Nicolas be a little out there in terms of orbits and things like that. The only thing is the side bust didn't love. But besides that, love the reference to Lady Margot. Thought it was really cool, really smart, and yet I don't think that unless you're really, really looking that deeply, you would say, oh, she's doing method dressing. Next up, we have another Rebecca Ferguson look, and this is by the brand Lurline. Now, Lurline is based in Saudi Arabia, and here we can see that Rebecca Ferguson is wearing this strapless leather dress. It is full of draping, which I think is rather intriguing because it creates this really interesting texture. At the bust area, there are these skulls in black that are embossed into the leather. I really kept thinking, oh, she's referencing the fact that Lady Jessica is sort of being the pusher. She's a pusher, Katie. She's a pusher of death of billions of people because she wants Paul Atreides to become the Messiah, the person. But when Paul becomes the Messiah, he's going to kill a bunch of people because you think this guy is going to be the savior, and then you're like, actually, no, he becomes the oppressor. Real bad. I just thought it was a really interesting notion to see Rebecca Ferguson play into this idea of death, this idea of decay, this idea of Lady Jessica being a part of that. The other thing that's interesting about the look is the black leather. From a lot of the interviews that I read with Jacqueline West, who is the costume designer of Dune 2, I believe also Dune 1, but Dune 2 as well, she was talking a lot about the Harkonnen sort of world and the fact that the Harkonnens wear a lot of leather and a lot of black, but she didn't want it to be like S&M leather. She wanted it to be more so sort of embossed leather, things that are really deep, and we'll talk a lot about that more when it comes to Austin Butler's outfits. But at a certain point in the film, again, spoiler, sorry, but it happens, Lady Jessica and Paul both drink the water of life, and then they figure out, oh shit, we're both descendants of Harkonnens. Lady Jessica, I believe her father is Lord Harkonnen, or Baron Harkonnen. So it kind of is a cool reference, and she makes a nod to the fact that Lady Jessica is part Harkonnen in her wardrobe and wearing the black leather. Because we can see from né Baron Fade's little cannibal baddies that, in fact, they love wearing black leather. They love it on Getty Prime, or whatever it's called. Kind of makes sense, and again, Rebecca Ferguson said, I am not taking this lightly, I'm going for it, and we love to see it. Now next up, let's talk about Timothée. He is wearing what I believe is a Bottega Veneta pair of pants and a pair of Berluti shoes. I don't know what the black turtleneck is, but it's probably a beautiful cashmere. This idea of the neck area is very significant, it seems like, in my opinion, to Timothée. Not really sure exactly, I don't really remember like picturing anything with the neck, but you know, if you have thoughts, comments, let me know. The thing that I found really interesting about the look was the fact that he's wearing these brown, I believe that they are embossed leather to look like lizard skin. I'm pretty positive that Bottega is not making lizard skin pants, but there are leather pants that are embossed to look like lizard skin, which historically exotic skins can be made out of lizard or alligator or crocodile or all these different things. Why I bring these up and why I think they're really interesting is a big part of Dune 2 is the sandworm and the sandworm scales, because when Paul figures out how to be the Lisan al-Khaib, it's because he has to ride the sandworm. Essentially, the way that you ride the sandworm is you have these two little hooks, you kind of chuck them onto the scales, the sandworm, and I have a picture of the scales so that you can see what the texture kind of looks like. Pretty positive that Timothée Timothée Chalamet is referencing the scales right here on his pants because he has these brown scales. Smart. Smart. Listen, the look overall, do I love it? Absolutely not. It's kind of blah. But the pants symbolism, that I enjoy. Thank you, Paul. And now we're going to close out Paris with Zendaya. Now, the first look we'll talk about is this beautiful Alaïa look. I believe it's from the Winter Spring collection. I'm just going to call it Fall 2024 because it's the most recent collection. But essentially, it is this beautiful 3D printed knit style, but it's this sort of twist around piece in white that is very intriguing. 3D knitting is becoming more and more of a thing across fashion, but I also have touched the dress post Zendaya wearing it. So this finger might be worth maybe like $12 to somebody important. I will say, I found the use Alaïa really, really interesting. Not only because it's like a hot brand and that collection was really, really well received across the internet. Also, Azzedine Alaïa was from Tunisia, and Tunis specifically, the city, the capital city of Tunisia, which is in the northern parts of Africa. So the fact that Azzedine is from Tunisia, from Tunis, and that's also where there are deserts, most definitely, I thought was interesting. But at the same time, this dress in particular is a reference to one of Azzedine's most signature interesting styles, because you have this twist bandeau that in reality, in real life, is actually very, very stiff. There was this actress named Arletty who was in this film called Hotel du Nord, which I believe Azzedine Alaïa saw when he was a very young child, and he was always inspired by this sort of zip in the bodice and the zipper in the bodice that went diagonally across her chest in this film, in her wardrobe. And so one of Azzedine Alaïa's most famous sort of styles is the zipper styles that went diagonal. They were partially, I also believe, inspired by like Rudy Gernreich and all those sort of designers, but there's a picture of Azzedine actually draping on Naomi Campbell when she was young. It's this sheer turtleneck thing with a zipper, but the zipper sort of comes undone and then it sort of twists around the body in like a big sort of thick sash of sorts, and Azzedine sort of like tying it at the bottom of her feet. But I think that's probably where the original inspiration comes from, is this coming apart of the piece, and that's why you get this twist motif across the top. And I just thought it was a really cool history of Alaïa moment. I also thought it was a cool way to tie in Tunisia and designers from Northern Africa into Zendaya's wardrobe for the film. I loved. Also, she just like looks hot in that dress. She can wear anything. That's the crazy thing about her, is like she has model proportions. She can wear anything. Now, the last look from Paris we'll talk about is this Zendaya look in Louis Vuitton. Now, we can see again Zendaya crop top, it's happening, but Zendaya is wearing this sort of high drapey sort of collar in a crop top, but also a full-length, floor-length skirt that is very sort of protruding, has beautiful sort of gathering, and creates gorgeous sort of shape and sculpture. This look is a custom look, but it is based on the Resort 2023 collection by Louis Vuitton, which was one of the shows where Nicolas Ghesquière sort of brought everybody that goes to the Louis Vuitton resort shows to none other than Southern California at the Salk Institute. Now, some of you may be smart cookies and know who Johannes Salk is, but for those that don't, like myself, Johannes Salk was the man that invented the polio vaccine. And so Johannes Salk at one point decided he wanted to build a institute of biomedical labs and things like that. And so he asked this wonderful architect named Louis Kahn to design a sort of really easy, beautiful structure that wouldn't take up a lot of time to upkeep, but still felt very artistic and creative. And so he created this really sort of beautiful, brutalist stone concrete area that looked out onto the sea and all this sort of stuff. When I look at what the Salk Institute looks like, it looks like it's straight out of Dune to me. It looks like it's something out of Getty Prime, or even certain parts of Arrakis that were taken over by the Harkonnens. It has that feeling to it. When I look at Zendaya's look, and I look at the looks that it was based on, which has a lot to do with, again, with futurism, this idea of draping in the collection. There's a lot of sort of draped styles. I feel like it's probably a take on Fremen culture and dressing, on the way that sort of spice is colored and its glitteriness, also possibly just the way that the deserts of Arrakis, the way that the wind blows them and creates these beautiful sort of textural shapes in the actual desert waves and sands and things like that. So that's what I think the inspiration here is. I also just think she looks stunning. She looks beautiful. It's a gorgeous textile. It's a gorgeous motif. It creates this really sort of lovely, almost like rose-like shape in all of the embossed textures. It looks lovely on her. I'm very happy to see it. I even really like the fact that her bracelet, which I assume is Bulgari because she's a Bulgari ambassador, is the serpentine or the serpenti bracelet, which is a snake. But in reality, if you think about it, it also kind of feels a little bit Dune worm-y, a little bit, you know what I mean? Sandworm-like. And the fact that it's in gold with a little silver head, very chic, very wonderful. Love Zendaya. Great job. Happy. Enjoyed. Next up, we're moving on to London, people, so buckle yourselves up because we got a lot to talk about. So first up, we'll talk about Anya Taylor-Joy, who wore a custom Christian Dior look. Now, this look got Anya Taylor-Joy and Dior in a bit of hot water. People were very upset. They're talking about the fact that the Dune films are about this idea of anti-colonialism, but also colonialism and the Middle East. That's what Frank Herbert apparently based a lot of the book on, is the colonization of the Middle East, the sort of extracting of certain natural resources in order to better the lives and the riches and the wealth of these different factions like the Harkonnens or the Atreides or the Emperor. You can't say that it doesn't seem somewhat true. I mean, literally, you think about it, the Middle East, oil, the way that they actually use like spice and melange and things like that to make their ships go certain ways that are safe, the use of oil to power planes and boats and trains and all those kinds of things makes a lot of sense. But the thing that I thought was really, really interesting is a lot of people were talking about the fact that Anya Taylor-Joy's look, which had this beautiful sort of white sheer hood and a gathered, deep plunging white dress underneath, and how that was really inspired by the hijab or the niqab. And I will say that the inspiration for the look originally I thought was Yves Saint Laurent. I was pretty positive that it was like mid to late 60s Yves Saint Laurent. And while there is a look that is a hooded look like that, it's a knit sort of look. The look actually isn't inspired by Yves Saint Laurent. And when I thought it was Yves Saint Laurent, I was like, oh, people really have like 100% accuracy in terms of looking at it as like the niqab or the hijab, because Yves Saint Laurent was from Algeria, but he was like a French colonizer, but he also descended from French colonizers of Algeria. So like that totally makes sense. But I was corrected. This look is actually from the spring 1961 collection, which was at least one season after Yves Saint Laurent left, and was by the designer Mark Bowen, who worked at Dior for 30 years, who is from Paris originally, and doesn't really have, at least from my understanding, a whole lot of ties to the Middle East. The thing that I'm pretty positive this was inspired by was nuns. If you look at nuns from, different periods throughout history, they have worn white habits, that's what they call them. Full white ensembles with habits that cover everything but parts of their face. I think that's really what that look is inspired by, although obviously we can put in pictures of veiled Muslim women throughout time as well, and you will see sort of corroborations between the two. But if we think about it, I do think that a lot of Dune looks into religion and things like that as ways of figuring out what the proper things in life should be. I mean, we think about it. I mean, Lady Jessica has all these prophecies about the religion and things like that and what Paul is. So it totally makes sense. And also, I mean, the Abrahamic religions, which are Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, are connected and have sort of pulled from each other in terms of cultural traditions and cultural dress. There is a lot there that is similar, but this Mark Bowen dress that Maria Grazia Chiuri, who's the creative director of Dior, was inspired by, is called the Himini dress, and in French, the Himini dress means hymen, which it also partially means nuptial bond. So the thing is, this dress that it was based on was the finale dress of Mark Bowen's collection for Dior, his first collection, and the finale dress of most haute couture shows historically have always been white wedding dresses, so that's why I assume you're seeing that. Also, I will say, maybe the exposure of the face is like a reference to the hymen, but again, listen, it was the 1960s. I don't know a whole lot about the anatomy of certain parts of the body for obvious reasons. I know certain things, but I don't know everything, so I'm not really sure what that has to do with this look, but I would assume the face covering thing is maybe the exposure of the face covering. The Himini dress, nuptial bond, that's what we're going to go with. It makes sense, and I also do think that it sort of pulls from, again, a lot of Christian nun habit imagery and clothing, which, again, historically within Christianity, the clothing of priests, not really nuns, but that has been very much so where a lot of wealth and status and luxury has been put by the church, the Catholic Church specifically. What I will say is, I do really love the reference. I do love the look. I know people are upset about it, and I completely understand, looking at it, why you could be said about it. But I love that dress. I think it's a beautiful dress. I think it looks stunning on her. I think it's a really great way for Maria Grazia Chiuri to actually take on the Marc Bowen styles, which is something that she really, really does pull from a lot. And I would say out of all the designers at Dior, she is most similar to Marc Bowen. And I see her staying for almost as long as Marc Bowen, as long as she wants to do the job, because he was there for 29 years. And you want to know why he was there for 29 years? Because he sold. The clients loved him. Same thing with Maria Grazia. To bring it back to like the hymen and the nuptial bond, Alai Atreides, who is Anya Taylor-Joy's character, we see little like sort of forward versions of her. She's actually the embryo in Lady Jessica's womb that she was pregnant with, and it's Paul's sister, but we have visions of her later at certain points. I assume that there's that reference to like the hymen and the nuptial bond and things like that because of where she is in terms of the body of Lady Jessica. Next up, we have Austin Butler wearing Saint Laurent again. This is a black and white ensemble. It's this big, beautiful black coat, very strong shoulder, wide leg pant, happy to see it, the white shirt. But the thing is, on Getty Prime, which is where the Harkonnens live, the only colors that you really see are black and white. And so there's also a scene where Fade is fighting in the Colosseum, and he has this little sort of outfit on that has like two little tail coats in the back, and Austin Butler's look here actually has two little tails in this big black oversized floor-length jacket. There are those two tails that flare out. You can't really see them in this photo, but it's true, believe me, I promise. And so I wondered if that was kind of what we were seeing as inspiration for the look, and if that is the case, I was happy with it. Next up, we have Florence Pugh, who is wearing Valentino. I believe this is a custom look. Since this look was worn, Pier Paolo is no longer at Valentino, but Alessandro Michele now is taking over Valentino, so I'm interested to see the difference. But I love this hooded style in this sort of dark, rusty brown or dark burgundy. The use of the hood, to me, sort of represents a lot of what we see with the Bene Gesserit, where they oftentimes, if they're not like the Reverend Mothers or they're not wearing those big sort of habits, they are also wearing hooded pieces. Leah Seydoux wears them. As Lady Margot, she wears a lot of them. And we also see it from Princess Rulin as well. There is this sort of covering of the head, maybe not entirely in hooded pieces, but I thought it was an interesting way of taking on that idea and playing into the character. Again, it's tough, you know, in the context, because everybody really at this point was really going for it, especially in London. The girls were fighting via fashions, but I really appreciate this look from Florence. I thought it was really beautiful. It looked great on her. Next up, we have Timothée Chalamet again wearing Bottega Veneta. Now, we can see that he's wearing a scale knit top, and that is actually from the fall 2023 collection as well. Sandworm scales, things like that. It makes sense. And I actually have a description of the sandworm. So their skin was thick, rough, and semi-metallic. It served the simple function of armor and was comprised of many scales, each a few feet in size. These scales overlapped and interlocked to form the armor that protected against internal sand invasion. In reality, that's what they use when they pull down so that they can ride the worms. So Timothée Chalamet is referencing Lisan al-Qaib being, you know, the man that rides on the worm and becoming part of Fremen society. I love it. I thought it was really cool. I thought it was really fun. I thought the brown leather also makes sense. Animal skins and things like that. The sandworms, yada yada. Love. Very happy to see it. Very good job. Thank you, Timothée Chalamet. Now, the craziest look of this whole goddamn experience was Zendaya wearing an archival Mugler fall 1995 Fembot suit. The Fembot suit from the fall 1995 Haute Couture collection is one of the most, if not the most iconic Thierry Mugler look. It's just one of the craziest experiences and pieces. It's not like this is a dress and you can stretch the dress and the weave will stretch with the body that's wearing it, yada yada, it's a knit or anything like that. No. These are pieces of metal and pieces of leather that were molded to a specific body. Took them 6 months to make this because Thierry Mugler made it with. The artist Jean-Jacques Urcun, the actual piece when they put it on Zendaya was done with Jean-Jacques Urcun actually there to make sure that the fitting worked well and made sure that the look was right, which is great. It also shows, in my opinion, certain respect for the piece and the garment, and it's not just trying to like shove everything in and make it happen and make it work, but rather like an actual respect for the vintage, which makes sense in the terms of La Roche because he was a vintage dealer and then became a stylist. The other thing that's crazy is this look originally was supposed to be just a metal bra, and then over the 6 months that they took to develop this out of pieces of metal and polymer, it became this full ensemble, which is what Zendaya is wearing. The fact that she's also like literally exposing her bust and also her booty, because at the back you can see her butt cheeks, and the fact that everybody's making fart jokes about it, I don't know, I like don't care that much about the fart jokes because like also it means people are seeing it and like we love people seeing archival Mugler, iconic. But just the fact that this woman can fit into this is still so absolutely goddamn crazy to me. And the fact that they got this pull, shout out to Casey Cadwallader and Mugler who were like, yeah, like we'll make this work. The one thing I will say is a lot of Dune, I'm pretty positive, like there aren't robots. Like they don't like robots because they're like they had a war with the robots or something a couple thousand years before the film. And so they kind of are like their own superhuman robot things and they use their brain or whatever. So I don't know how much robotics goes into the actual film, or like maybe there are people with like prosthetics that are robotic. I don't know. But in reality, not much robots, but like I still love this look and I'm very happy to see it. And it was crazy and it's wild and it's absolutely goddamn insane that they pulled that off. Like that is the look of the 2020s. Sorry. Like there will not be another moment. Maybe Zendaya being the co-host of the Met Gala this year might top it, but like this is the pinnacle of vintage pulls as of right now. Now the last city we'll talk about is New York. This is where the Dune premiere ended, and first we're going to be talking about Anya Taylor-Joy, who showed up wearing Margiela. I think this is a really, really interesting look. I promise that I'm actually working on a Margiela video. I promise, I swear on my life, I am in the middle of writing it. It will get done. It needs to be talked about. But here we can see that Anya is wearing this beautiful gold lame dress that is underneath of this black petticoat in tulle that is made up partially of, tulle. That's what you see sort of draped up top, covering the bodice of the dress. But there's also this big sort of floated out petticoat that has horsehair crinoline, and that's those sort of bands that wrap around. Normally, petticoats sit on the inside of garments because that's what gives certain skirts their big voluminous shape. But here we can see that it's actually inverted on its head, which in reality, when you think about the history of Margiela, very much so this idea of bringing the inner out, whether that is seams and darts, whether that is linings, whether that, all different kinds of things. There is a lot of that going on, and so it's a really cool idea to transform that and yet still keep it really beautiful, really glamorous, really sexy and seductive. But the other thing about that collection is it was inspired partially by Madeleine Vianney. Madeleine Vianney, iconic French designer who invented the bias cut technique used for actual dressmaking. But the thing is, the bias cut technique, if you didn't know, was actually used historically for the linings of garments, and then Vianney experimented with it as something that would be used as actually just the outer parts of garments. And that's kind of what we see also with Margiela a lot, is the way that his sort of garments worked, again, inverting this idea of things that shouldn't be seen in garments to becoming seen on garments and being the main focus of a garment. But there were also these silhouettes that Vianney played with called either the carnival or the honeycomb silhouettes, and they actually utilized sort of black fitted dresses, very 1930s-esque, but they had these big sort of sheer skirts that flowed out from around the hip area to create elegant silhouettes, but still see that sort of slip dress underneath. And so it's actually kind of a very cool reference that John Galliano did. We can also see that when it comes to the gold of the lame underneath. I assume that it is probably a reference to the sort of cinnamon gold looking coloring of spice melange. I know that they say that like spice can look like blue or it can look whatever, but like in the movie, to me, it always looks dusty, darkish gold, or like a dusty, darky, cinnamony color that kind of looks gold. If you think about it, Alaïa Atreides is very much so infused with the juices that also partially, I think, come from the baby sandworms that also ingest the spice as they're sandworming around. She's definitely referencing her character and herself. But yeah, that Margiela video, it is coming, I promise. I'm working on it. Next up, we have Austin Butler, who's wearing Haider Ackermann. Now, this is a pretty simple white jacket, white shirt, black tie, black pocket square, black pant, black boot, fade. Wears a lot of black and white. Harkonnen, it's not the most exciting, definitely not, but is it technically on theme? Yeah, I guess. Next up, we have Florence Pugh wearing Valentino once again. She's wearing this beautiful halter neck, really micro-gathered gown, and it has a backless sort of cutout and side cutout as well, but it's in this beautiful sort of light gray. Now the thing is, when we see Princess Irulan at the end of the movie, she is wearing that like little chainmail look that she wore to Arrakis, but she's also wearing a gray silk-y hood. And so I wonder if that's kind of what the reference is, this idea of the gray coloring and things like that, and Princess Irulan's sort of ending outfit and costuming from the film. Also, I think the dress is beautiful on her. I thought it looked really, really lovely. Again, I love that Florence really is going for it throughout the entirety of this Dune film. Next up, we have Rebecca Ferguson, who's wearing this full black look by Olivier Theyskens. Olivier Theyskens, if you don't know, is a, I believe, Belgian designer. He did a collection where all of his pieces are made up of these beautiful vintage laces. So you see fishnets and regular sort of bobbin laces and honeycombs and all these sorts of things. I don't know. I thought it was really cool. Do I see necessarily what the reference is to Lady Jessica? I feel like maybe it's a gothy, punky take on like maybe what the Bene Gesserit wore, the full black, the Reverend Mother, you know, those sheer panels. But we also see Lady Jessica take on her own sort of aesthetics and costuming of what the Reverend Mother will look like. I'm intrigued at that. And also I wonder where we'll see Lady Jessica go in the future. And so maybe that is sort of a tie-in there. We then saw Timothée in full leather. Again, this is a Prada look. We can see a sort of dusty, browny, deserty leather top with a pair of black pants. Nothing really crazy to write home about. Listen, he definitely worked his magic and worked his, you know, method dressing in certain ways, and so I appreciate that from Timothée. And here we can see that it definitely is doing it, but again, is it that exciting? No. The final look we'll talk about for this whole video is Zendaya in Stéphane Rollin, which is this full haute couture gown. I love it on her. I love this sheer paneling. I also wonder if it's partially a reference to the house sigil from Dune the movie. It may be like a reference to the Harkonnen sigil, which is very like pointy and sharp. I also just, again, love this idea of this beautiful floor-length gown, which has this sort of sheer exposure. There are a lot of like sheer panels in the Harkonnen clothing too, so I don't know exactly what Chani does in the next section of this franchise, but I'd be intrigued to see. The other thing is, the bottom of the dress is covered in this beautiful, sort of intriguing K and metal 3D pieces. Again, I think that looks a bit like spice and things like that, just the coloring or whatever. Very chic, very beautiful. I'm excited to see what Dune 3 brings us, because I have a feeling Zendaya is referencing it all. But thank you guys so much for watching. I'm sorry this took forever, but also I didn't want to not do the video. I thought it was very important. There was a lot of fashioning, but I wanted to also make sure that I got to like do all the research so I could give you as much information as I could. I hope you guys enjoyed. I will see you guys in the next one, and TTY. Oh.